Good evening. My name is Maria, also known as Brown Girl Interrupting, and this is Pain to Power Leading with Love, brought to you by the iRant Network. And I am really excited today because we have an amazing guest on, whom I'm going to welcome in just a few moments. But before I do, as you can see, my backdrop has changed a little bit because I am reporting from a different space today. I have the opportunity to be a part of a community this week, which is called Unbound Ed, and it's an institute of learning in which I am actually able to work with educators. And part of why I'm talking about this is because part of our healing journey is that once we find our voices, once we know how we can get through things, the purpose of that is to be able to then pay it forward, to move it to others. And so I really encourage us in this process to always find, like, so where is your voice? What is it that you do that helps others heal? For me, it's this. I am really, really passionate about the power of education and knowledge in transforming lives and in changing trajectories. And to me, it's healing communities, it's healing students, it's healing teachers in their process of learning. And so I am in Orlando, Florida at the Standards Institute with Unbound Ed, doing just that and continuing to find my own path of healing through it because I've been able to find a little bit more of my voice and strengthen my voice through new knowledge. So I hope that in your journey, you're continuing to heal through learning, through leading, and through continuing to develop yourself as an individual and in supporting others. And welcome, Stephanie Gale. Good evening. And welcome. So glad to have you here. And now I am so glad to introduce you to my guest tonight, which is a very special guest. He is so graciously allowed me to postpone our first interview that we were supposed to have. And we were really lucky to have him here today. His name is Andrew Tactix James, and we're going to learn more about what the Tactix is. He is a movement enthusiast. You can see it right there, right? Movement enthusiast and a healing artist who is using physical fitness, mental health, and just awareness of self to be able to help lead others in love. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I'm so glad that you're able to join me today. And I see I've got my Ranters family heavy here in the chat. What's up, Kennedy Williams? Thank you for coming and showing up. So Andrew, I again, like I said, I've mentioned that you're a movement enthusiast, that you are a healing artist. These are some amazing things you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do in relation to all of this? And before we kind of get started in understanding who you are.
Yeah. In terms of movement enthusiast, basically what that means is I'm a student of movement. So I've over the years, ever since I can remember, I guess my first introduction to movement was through dance, and then it kind of evolved into getting into personal training, and then from personal training, I kind of gravitated into other modalities like martial arts and things of that nature. And then it kind of just kept evolving, and I kept having this thirst for knowledge and trying to explore all areas of movement and getting into different forms or different ways of how the body can articulate in space. And I'm forever going to be a student of movement. I don't think I'm ever going to be an expert, and so I don't ever label myself as such. And so I felt like movement enthusiast or student of movement would be the best way to describe what it is that I do, because it's hard for, because I'm so involved in many different disciplines, it's hard for me to kind of categorize it into just or put it into
Mhm,
one box and define
mhm.
it, right? Because I'm so broad spectrum in that regard.
Well, I love that because I think that's one of my biggest pet peeve is when we try to narrow ourselves into a box of one
Yeah,
thing, because so much of who we are is dynamic and flows through so many different things, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
So that's a wonderful thing. And And so I definitely want to learn more about what you've been doing with that. But we're going to
Mhm.
step back a little bit more
Mhm.
because one, I've invited you on the show. I found you. I found you on TikTok.
Yeah, yeah.
I did. As many of my audience members know, I'm a little bit of a TikTok stalker. I find people on TikTok. I would say I'm going to reframe that. I'm a TikTok researcher, and I researched you,
Hmm.
and what I was picking up is that you've obviously come to this amazing place of now leading people through movement, through understanding
Hmm.
themselves, understanding their bodies, and you've come to this, but we always start somewhere, right?
Hmm.
So let's step back a little bit and first, being on here as the story of pain to power, I want to know a little bit about what that has meant for you when you think about your life and you think about your experiences. What does pain to power mean for you?
Paying the power. I mean, I I can really only speak for myself, but I always had a very negative connotation associated with the word pain, be that physical or emotional. But really, pain to me is kind of a it's kind of an indication as to what needs to be healed, and it's very important that we're aware of what needs to be healed. And I often reference there's a story that I think we talked about this a while back when we were setting this up, but there's a girl by the name of Angeline Blocher, and she has this rare condition where she can't experience any physical pain. And so, when I heard this story at first, my naive mind was thinking, "Oh, that's really cool. She's like a superhero. She can endure all kinds of pain and not feel it or anything." But when you really look at it or when you think about it in hindsight, like, she could be having internal bleeding. She could have some kind of internal thing going on, and she would have no indication because she doesn't have the necessary receptors to signal that she's in some sort of pain. And so that could be very detrimental to her health. And I feel like the same can be said for emotional pain as well, in the sense that, if you don't have if you're not aware of the emotional trauma that you're often going through, that you've had to go through within your life, because a lot of the times we get into this tendency of having to endure these traumatic experiences so much to the point where we choose to suppress it, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. And, if it's subconscious, we often think, oh, well, it's buried deep down inside. I'm never going to have to worry about that again. But then you don't realize that a lot of those things that are subconscious tend to like manifest outwardly and physically. And then they can also often end up being very destructive to yourself or to those around you. And so for me, that's kind of how I would define pain to power, in the sense of recognizing your pain, recognizing what needs to be healed, and then going through the process of healing that.
Mm. That's a beautiful thing because I think like everything you just said, right? Reframing the idea
Mhm.
of pain as something that's necessary almost,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not a bad thing, but it's an
Mhm.
awareness of self,
Yeah.
which is powerful. And I see Logic saying real talk. Yeah, definitely. And that awareness of trauma is so important because,
Mhm.
when you said that, I was thinking, I know exactly what you mean. I'm
Mhm.
one of those people who, when I feel stress and pain, I have in many instances
Mhm.
ignored, right?
Yeah.
And what has happened is that my body has responded, and your
Mhm.
body tells you things when you're not listening,
Yeah.
right? Like I think you definitely pinpointed that just exactly. So for you growing up, like if you were to think back to some of the painful moments that have helped you to understand yourself better, had that build that awareness for you, what was it like growing up for you? Just as personally, but also like in school, what was
Mhm.
that experience like? And tell us a little bit about that.
Um, well, it's funny because I didn't realize a lot of the trauma that I was enduring at a young age until I got into adulthood, right? Until the things started to kind of manifest outwardly, and I started to become destructive or erratic towards not just myself, but to the people around, like I alluded to earlier. And the more specific things from my past stem from my upbringing, starting from school, and I grew up with a learning disability, and so that right there was I was working with a guidance counselor during that time, and so they had kind of labeled it as a learning disability, but they never really specified what kind of learning disability it was per se. And then they were attributing it to the dysfunction that I was surrounded by within my home, in terms of like my parents, going back and forth through legal issues, because they had split before I was born. And then, for about 9 years of my life, I was living with my mom, and she was constantly taking my dad to court. And so at a young age, I was having to witness like a broken home. And so I never really had a good representation of what the ideal family looks like. And, the guidance counselor that I was working with at the time had, you know, basically labeled that, or kind of categorized that as, or contributed that to the reasons why I was developing this learning disability, and like not being able to function optimally in school as a result of that. And so because of that, and because of that label that was bestowed upon me, like I kind of, I guess I had a chip put on my shoulder, where it was like if people are telling me that I have this learning disability and this is the cap, and like they're treating it almost like a disease that can't be cured. And so my logic at a young age at that point was like, okay, well, if there's nothing I can do about it, then why even bother trying? And so I remember I just kind of like wasted most of my elementary and high school years not really striving to do anything really, because, not only were my school teachers telling me like, yeah, you have a learning disability, or, you're not going to excel like the other students. My mom would even say that. She would say, like, I just remember like she was very impatient with me whenever trying to um, teach me things regarding my school, like trying to help me with my schoolwork or whatever. She was just very, very impatient. And yeah, it kind of put a toll on me emotionally, and prevented me from really trying to push myself to excel beyond what that label was put on for me. So yeah,
Mm.
I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah, I mean that's really important. I think what you did, and you keep saying the word label because I think that's really important. It sounds like
mhm.
there that idea again of putting someone in a box.
Yeah,
It sounds like you were put into a box, but you didn't accept the box, but yet it sound like if you were to tell me like when did you realize you didn't accept the box? Because it seems like there was a point where you were kind of you internalized what was being told to you as a truth.
absolutely. Yeah, for a very long time, I actually did believe it, because I mean, when you hear those things, especially like, it's one thing when you hear it from your teachers, like, oh, you're not doing too good, or you have a learning disability. But when you start to hear it from your own mother, and when she and I mean, there's a whole story behind that. I mean, we can get into that a little bit, but um, she had said some hurtful things out of anger. A lot of it having to do with, me not amounting to anything, and that kind of really stuck with me. And to this day, still, I still feel like I battle with it. So I can't even really say I'm 100% over it, but I've grown a lot since then. And I'm slowly beginning to strip away the layers of that label of, you're never going to amount to anything, or you're never going to excel at anything, or you're never going to be this, that, and the third. Like, I was having a good discussion with my girlfriend, just the other night, and we were talking about this very thing, and just telling her that, it still kind of haunts me a little bit, because it's like I read this book called, the Warrior of the Light, and there's a section in the book that talks about the hidden enemy. And basically, the hidden enemy is somebody that was a tormentor in your life from your past, but one that you can no longer hurt, or you can no longer like affect, because they're no longer in your life. And so they forever remain a hidden enemy in your mind, because now you're like, that's what governs everything that you do in life. And for me, based off of the things that my mom said about me, like, at the end of the day, every child wants to be accepted by their parents. They want to make their parents proud. And for me, I felt like me, I like I'm still striving to try and prove my mom wrong, and maybe it's for the wrong reasons because I'm trying to prove that like those labels are BS. It's not. It doesn't define who I am, and yet, you know, I don't have a relationship with my mother right now. Like I haven't spoken to her in like over maybe 3 4 years, but I still treat her in my mind. I treat her as a hidden enemy in a sense, and I use enemy very loosely, but she's an enemy in the sense of like I'm still trying to win at something, if that makes sense. I'm still trying to
Mm-hmm.
achieve something in her eyes to make her to prove to her, or I guess prove to myself that those labels don't define me. And so, yeah, that's kind of that's kind of what I've been working at trying to heal throughout my journey, I guess.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And Joss says that's an intriguing story. I think definitely, right? Like, and to me, what I hear is that it's like, it sounds like the adults around you let you down.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that would be somewhat accurate, but I think I feel like also that yes, that's one way of putting it, but also that at some point when you start to become an adult, you have to start to take responsibility for your life. And even like your past doesn't basically your past doesn't define you. That's what I believe. I believe that you're molded by your past to a certain extent, but it doesn't define who you ultimately become. And I feel like people that live in the past and are tormented by their past and haven't gotten over their past, they let the past define them, and then they don't take ownership or responsibility,
Mm,
and then they point blame. And for me, I don't want to be I don't I like I realize that I can't ascend to the person that I'm trying to become if I'm always blaming my mom or blaming my teachers for this, that, and the third. Because at the end of the day, like we grow through challenge, we grow through struggle, right? And if it weren't for that struggle, I probably wouldn't be the person that I am today. So um in a lot of ways, it really depends on how you view it. It's like I can point blame and say I'm this way because you made me this way, or I can look at it like I'm grateful that you made me
mm,
this way because look at the person I get to be. And I'm in control of
yeah.
that. I can change. I can choose to dwell on the past and like, let that haunt me and hold that chip on my shoulder. Or I can say, no, I'm going to use this to my advantage, and you know, pressure makes diamonds. So I'm going to take that
Mm.
pressure and I'm going to shine. So
I love
that's the
that.
mentality. Yeah.
But I love it, and I think that's the idea of like the complexity is that you have to. There's almost this fine line
Hmm.
of acknowledging the existence of something happening,
Yeah.
the impact of that existence, but not
Hmm.
sitting in it long enough that you then blame it as the only narrative, right? So
Absolutely.
you've reclaimed your narrative, and that's the power piece, right? Like
Yeah.
by not, and it sounds like a big piece of that reclaiming is that you took ownership. Ownership is, and so tell me a little bit about that, like that process for you. Like what has it been like to take ownership for some of the things that you've experienced,
Right.
and is it, was it difficult? Were there areas and times where you struggled with that?
Oh, I'm still struggling with it. I don't want to. I don't want to sit here and act like I'm all high and mighty and like I've unlocked the secret code or anything. I haven't. I'm still going through the process of taking ownership for it. I've just recognized and realized that that is something that I need to do. I can't keep sitting here and blaming my mother. And yeah, I mean, you can sit here and say yeah, there's a lot at fault on her part, right? But at the end of the day, it's like I have to realize that, I wouldn't be who I am if it weren't for this. And this is part of the process. I believe we all have a purpose. And in order to get to that purpose, there are certain things that we have to endure, right? It's like
Mm,
I attribute it to kind of like when you watch a movie, right? I love movies, so I use movie analogies a lot. But when you watch any kind of movie, right, there generally the format for most movies is you have a beginning, middle, and an end, and you have the climax where let's say you have the hero. The hero endures some kind of adversity. he overcomes the adversity, and then he comes out on top, right?
Hmm.
Without the climax, without the adversity, without the opposing force to present a challenge for our hero, that movie would be boring. No one would watch that movie, right? So even in a romance, like even in a romance movie, it's like there is some kind of like adversity. Maybe it's like a guy and a girl, they fall in love, but then another person comes in and interjects or whatever, and
Hmm.
it causes some kind of conflict, or the parents don't approve of the relationship. There's some kind of opposing force that creates a struggle for the hero's journey, and I feel like everyone needs that struggle. And so again, it's just me reminding myself of that, of like I need I need that struggle. I can't be naive in my way of thinking and think that I'm gonna go through life unscathed. I like every adversity that I've faced in my life, I've always ended up being okay,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
it might have sucked in the moment, but it passed, and I made it out on the other side. And
Yeah.
then I was good for a while, and then I was met with another form of adversity. It sucked for a while, and then I was okay. And I feel like that's how life is until you're 6 feet under in the ground. So
Mm.
I just kind of take it in strides and take the bad with the good.
Well, and like you said, right? Like I think every form of adversity, because we're all experiencing adversity, and you're
Yeah.
always going to. I was just talking to my 20-year-old about this. Is that like, so what are you going to do the next time you have a challenge? Because you know you're going to have another one, right? Like
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah.
something that happens that's going to trigger you. So
Yeah.
what's your next step? Like what? How do you do that, right? And that's that resiliency piece that's so important. So
Right.
so let me ask you, like in that, like in your journey of this finding power, right? So we
Hmm.
talked about the pain piece, but you found power. But like, what has like have you felt that as you experience different things, like you've kind of built a toolbox
Hmm.
of skills to move through quicker every time or differently?
Hmm.
I'm not gonna say quicker because I think
Yeah.
every time is different, right? But
Right, right, right.
differently each time you've come up with these challenges or adversity, as you've moved on. But like, what's your toolbox? What do you go to when you have those moments to move through stuff?
That's a great question. I'd have to say, given my background, so I originally went to school before I got into fitness. I originally went to school for film and broadcasting, and so I have a bit of a creative background in that sense, and so I've always kind of really loved expressing my creativity, and I feel like that's been a big part of my toolbox in terms of my healing, because for me, creativity is my cathartic it's my cathartic tool. It's what I use to channel whatever it is that I'm feeling. And so um I know we were talking about or I don't know if are you familiar with uh well, rather, have you read the book Think and Grow Rich?
I have not, but I know
Okay.
you've referenced it many times. So
Ye-
tell me a little bit about the book, and then tell us the impact of it
Oh,
on you.
okay. So it's I want to call it a financial literacy book, but it's a lot more than that, and it's unlike most finance books, because it goes more into the mindset of being rich, rather than this is how you make $1 million, because they consider money more as like currency. It's like it's energy, right? And so based on that energy piece, in chapter 11 of the book, they talk about this concept of sex transmutation. And basically sex being like your sexual energy is basically the most potent energy that there is, right? And transmutation is all about taking one form of energy and converting it into another form. And so the point I'm trying to make is that for me, I've always kind of been of the mind of like, you know how do I transform my negative energy or the negative emotions into something positive? Because when you look at like artists, for example, whether it's a musician or a painter or whatever, let's use musicians as an example, right? um Taylor Swift is someone that comes to mind, right? She, whenever she goes through a breakup with her latest dude or whatever, she writes a song about it. And then, in that moment when she's writing it, she's feeling all of her negative emotions, all of
Mm.
her pain and her turmoil and everything. She's translating it or transmuting that um into her artistry, and then she puts it out into the universe, and it's no longer her. It's no longer, those feelings no longer belong to her.
Yeah.
She's sharing that with the world. And so that's kind of what I've always kind of been accustomed to in terms of like the videos that I make, or for example, like on TikTok, how you found me was
Mm.
through my morning thoughts, and that was kind of just a random like whim, on the whim type of thing. Like I wasn't planning on making it this extravagant video or anything. I was just like, I got these deep thoughts right now, and I want to put them out. Like I'm gonna try a different method. Normally, I write my thoughts down, but I'm just gonna make a video about it, and I just put it out and shared my thoughts, and it kind of just started to generate traction, and then I just kept doing it. And for me, it was like I said, it was very cathartic, because it's like when you like, when people say like affirmations, like they play up
Right.
affirmations, and I'm a firm believer in affirmations. But it's like sometimes when I'm listening to affirmations, it's like it doesn't sound like me, so sometimes it doesn't resonate.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
Versus like when I started doing the morning thoughts, and then I'd play them back and do the affirmations or whatever, I'm like, oh, I'm familiar with this voice. And so it's getting through my subconscious a lot easier, because it's almost like my higher self talking to my lower state self
Mm.
and trying to
Mm.
get me up to that level. And so that for me was part of my healing journey and part of my toolbox. Sorry, I know I go
Mm.
off on tangents or whatever.
No, but that's no, I like it's all related. And honestly, I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, that's awesome because now I have language. Because I would say I everything you said to me like completely resonates because I believe that's what writing has been for me, is that
Hmm.
literally it's like the emotions are inside me. And once I put them on paper, they are no longer like I'm no longer holding on to them, but they exist in a space. So I give them life, but
Hmm.
that life doesn't take over me, right? So
Right.
transmutation of energy sounds like a little bit like that. Is that that idea is that like it's not it's the energy doesn't take over you because you've taken power of it.
Hmm.
And I see Living Ishay Reviews is here. Welcome, Ishay. And he says rechanneling that energy. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Rechanneling it for something that's purposeful. And it's power because now the emotion, the experience doesn't own you.
Hmm.
You have control over
Yeah.
it. And okay, and so just as total transparency and disclosure, I do listen. I go back and I listen to a lot of the things I say on social media sometimes when I'm in a in a tough place. And you've
Sure.
seen some of my TikToks. I know you've commented on them, right?
Hmm.
And like
Yeah.
I there is something about hearing yourself give a message out
Hmm.
that actually can be almost like internalized by you, right? Like, and now
Absolutely.
I believe it. I believe
Hmm.
it because I'm saying it to others, but I'm saying it to myself. Like, there's a
Absolutely.
reason I put it out there.
Yeah.
And I totally believe it's my higher self giving a message to me, and like I realize
Hmm.
it later. So yeah, I agree with that, all of it.
Yeah. Hmm.
Welcome, Jose Ilagan. That is my very good friend here. That's how life builds you up to your potential for sure, right?
Awesome.
Like,
Awesome. Yeah.
and you find your potential within that. Like you find your power when you are able to channel your energy in positive ways. So part of power is that positivity shift,
Hmm.
right? What are some other mindset shifts that have to do with that power for you? Like, what are some other things, particularly that you've had to change about the way you see life or the way you move through life that have
Hmm.
helped you in that?
Um, I'd say like I've had to be very real with myself and acknowledge a lot of my insecurities. Because again, a lot of like much like a lot of my thoughts, my insecurities mainly have been very subconscious, and I've noticed they definitely come out, and they come out in my relationships. And I think my girlfriend's watching this, so she can attest to this. Like it, like sometimes, so I like, and going back to like my mom, for example, like I feel like I've gotten some traits from her. She's got a very short fuse, and so I feel like I get that from my mom, and I've gotten better. I'm not violent or anything like that. Like I don't want to put that out there into the universe, but I'm definitely like I'm I guess people will make jokes and say, "Oh, it's because you're a Pisces, you're ultra sensitive and all that stuff like that." And maybe there's some truth to that or whatever. But I get very in my feels at times, and I take things to heart. And my insecurities definitely outshine sometimes, and my ego kind of gets in the way. I've gotten a lot better, but a lot of it, like you were mentioning about journaling has been another thing that has been really cathartic for me. So meditation in conjunction to journaling to kind of get my thoughts out on paper, because I'm sure you can attest to this, where it's like it's the balance of like chaos meets order, right? Where it's like
Mm.
it's in your head, it's just a jumbled mess. It's chaos
Yeah.
in there. But then when you write it down on paper, it's like, oh, everything is so organized. I can actually see all the stuff that I need to sort out and deal with. So I feel like journaling, you just get bullet points. And like I don't know if you're familiar with the book The Artist Way. I forgot the name of the author, but she I think it's Julianne Cameron or something. I'll get the name for you later, but
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
she has this she's got two different tactics for dealing with like emotions, and the first one is the artist date, where you take yourself out on a date. Basically, it's like kind of like a method of like learning to love yourself more, right? Because we don't give ourselves enough love, and if you don't know how to love yourself, then how can you realistically love someone else or love the world the way you're supposed to love the
Yeah.
world, right? And I know that sometimes sounds very cliche about like self love and cultivating self love, but really, really and truly, and I've learned this in my current relationship now, is like I sometimes falter in terms of how I express love to my girlfriend, and it causes chaos, but it's because I haven't yet learned how to love myself. And like I respect my girlfriend because she's super patient with me, because in terms of my healing process, but it takes me a while to kind of get there, and I have to sit back and like check my ego and recognize, okay, like I'm
Oof.
slipping, but I got to deal with myself first so I can express more love. And so the other tool that the author from Artist Way recommends is the I think it's the artist journal, or the daily journal or something. But basically, the objective is it's morning pages. Sorry, that's the name of it. So you basically every single morning you wake up, before you check your social media and all that other stuff. You open up your journal and you write 3 pages of freeform thought, whatever comes to mind. Yeah, and even if
Mm.
it's like a lot of people will
Yeah.
like who aren't used to writing, they might be like, "Oh, I don't know what to write," and like then you literally just write, "I don't know what to write." You just put pen to paper and you just keep writing. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write until stuff starts to come to you, right? Because the mind never shuts off, right? So your conscious
Yeah.
mind will shut off when you go to bed, but then as soon as your conscious mind shuts off, your subconscious mind takes over. So your mind is working 24/7. So to say, "Oh, I'm not thinking of anything," or "I don't know what to think about," it's not true. Like you have
There's
six
always something.
there's always something, right? So write it down on
Yeah.
paper, and then it allows you to it allows you to process your thoughts a lot easier. So yeah.
And I love that. And you lifted so many things. Like I'm like, where do I start? Like, no, but like I resonate with so much of it, right? The insecurity that leads to your ego getting in the way of
Hmm.
you being able to kind of be vulnerable, right? Like
Hmm.
and to take care of ourselves is a big piece, right? I
Yeah.
think like and that ego and the insecurity end up definitely like impacting so many of our relationships, our
Hmm.
dynamics with and and it starts with ourselves. So like part of it
Hmm.
is really that. And it isn't. I think the thing is for me is that I always feel like it's not that it's not that it's cliche to say self-love. I think
Hmm.
that it's misinterpreted what we mean by that, right?
Yeah.
Like it's that whole idea of self-care, right? Is like bubble baths and
Hmm.
massages. No, it's
Okay.
literally like facing yourself and
Hmm.
recognizing when you need to limit your energy to
Hmm.
others, or you need to be careful about what energy you're putting in your space to take care of your own peace, right?
Absolutely.
And you have to know yourself to make those decisions. So to truly do self-care, you have to have self-love.
Absolutely.
So they're interrelated, but they're not easy.
Hmm.
It's not easy to acknowledge one, that you have insecurities or that you have an
Hmm.
ego. That's been a hard one for me, the ego thing. I like, I most of my life I'm like, oh, I don't have an ego. Like I'm so nice. I'm so
Yeah.
like, but the truth is no, we all have egos. Like even just the desire to want to control outcomes is
Hmm.
comes from your ego.
How does ego show up in your life for you?
Oh gosh, in so many ways. So
I
at
don't.
least
I don't mean to
like
put you on the
no,
spot. But
no, no, no. I appreciate it. Like honestly, I would say recently what I've
hmm.
realized is that it shows up in control.
Mm,
I am one of those people who I can do organized chaos and I can kind of like go with the flow, but there are
mhm,
certain things that I want to be able to control the outcomes of. And
mm,
particularly I would say relationships is a big one for me.
ah,
Because I feel like I need to have control over it. So I definitely like have recently acknowledged that when I want something to happen, if
mhm,
it doesn't happen, it's like, is my ego the reason that I'm upset about this? Because I
mhm.
wanted it so bad and now like I
Yeah.
can't have it. So what I've had to check with my ego is that like, is it based in fear? So
Mm,
like there's insecurity ego and sometimes there's ego that comes from this fear
mhm,
because the fear of that uncertainty. So
mm,
if I can let go of the control of something and I let go of this fear of uncertainty, then I'm kind of able to get control of my ego and be like, well, I lend it to the universe. Like whatever is going to happen is going to happen and I'm
right,
just going to sit back and have faith that I I'm going to be pointed in the direction I need to go.
right.
Right? Like and but that was really hard for me. It's been
Mhm,
really really hard for me because it's my ego,
mhm, of
right?
course.
Um and I love it. I see so many people in the chat chiming in. Stephanie says I'm currently learning about attachment types, which is very much connected to ego, right? Your
Yeah.
attachment type, if it's a fear of abandonment that comes from insecurity and ego, or if it's a fear of connection
Mhm,
and actually having contact and relationships with people, right? Like all of that is attachment style related.
right.
And very interesting, yes, for sure.
Mhm,
But that's a great question. I love it. I see some more people in the chat. We have Ad from Advice Speaks for sending good vibes to everyone. Thank you for joining
thank
in
you.
from the Ranters Network. So and Stephanie says, I have the pages a bit. I need the accompanying book. So I want to go more into all you've done. Oh, I definitely wanted to shout this out because you have a fellow Piscean in here.
Oh, what's up, man?
Pisceans, we channel. Oh, I missed it. I didn't get to say the whole quote that was in there. But Stephanie says, as Pisceans, we channel the undercurrents of emotions. Well, your water signs, right? The undercurrents of
Yeah,
emotions for sure. Um, but I think that also makes sense to me when you said you're a Pisces. I was like, oh, I get it now. Like I tend to
yeah,
be drawn to Pisces because of that undercurrent of emotion, that flow
yeah.
of. I'm a Capricorn, so I'm
Oh,
like
okay,
also
okay.
also one of those control things, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I'm a driver, I'm a
Mhm,
pusher, but that flow is so important. You need that
mhm,
balance in life.
yeah.
But with that and thinking about all of this transmutation, I want to take a quick break. And I have been using my transmutation truthfully through
Mhm,
my writing. And so we're going to
mhm,
learn a little bit about my blog with this commercial, and learn a little bit more about my journey of pain to power and why I started writing to begin with.
awesome.
Hi, my name is Maria, but you are soon going to know me as Brown Girl Interrupting. And what I mean by that is that very soon, hopefully, you're going to be following my blog. I am a writer, and I started writing because I was married, I had children, and then my life changed when I separated. And I did a lot of learning and reflecting and growing in that process of change because change always leads us to that. And I've decided to share that with the rest of the world because sometimes hearing that someone else is going through the same thing as you, or understanding and putting words to the feelings and experiences we're having, helps us to heal from them, or grow from them, or learn from them. And so that's what my blog is. It's writing about life, healing, relationships, parenting, dating, marriage, pain, love, mistakes, growth, and coming out whole still in all of it as a human, flawed, but always open to new things. So that's my life, that's my journey, and it's written in this blog. But my hope is that you are going to go to www.browngirlinterrupting.com and join and subscribe to the blog and read all about my story to help you maybe gain some perspective on yours. So definitely go and check out my blog. For those of you here tuning in, if you're new, if you are, a follower but haven't done it yet, please go do that, because it really has been my journey. And I would say that it is it's a form that has helped me heal and many others in terms of just taking those experiences of life. My most recent post was just that, literally, like, I was a French press broke in my house. Like, that's exactly what happened. Like, it was, the post is called Shattered, and my French press broke. But it took me down this whole path of the idea of the shattering of illusion sometimes, or shattering of experiences, and what that is when we have to pick up those pieces and that experience, and that's it, right? Like, we find our voices in the way that we're able to express ourselves. So speaking of which, Morning Thoughts has definitely been your voice. That's what drew me to you. But then I kind of started following you on Instagram, and you are the Tactix guy, right? Like, so tell me more about how you tell me more about Animal Flow. I want to know more about what it is, and I know we have some videos that Jaw's going to throw up in a few moments, and just what brought you to it, and what it has inspired you to really get into this.
Well, like I said earlier, I was kind of I was more of a creative than a I guess in, I don't know if intellect is the right word, but I was always drawn more to my creative side, if that makes sense. And so for me, I grew up loving dance. So my biggest influence was Michael Jackson, as I'm sure most dancers will also um, attest to. And from there, I kind of started to delve into different kinds of dance styles. So I got into like funk style, so popping, locking, and then got into breakdancing, fell in love with it. And then from breakdancing, it kind of transitioned into gymnastics, and then gymnastics transitioned into capoeira. And then again, because I'm a student of movement and a movement enthusiast, I'm always searching for the next thing, like, to kind of tickle my fancy, for lack of a better word. And so eventually it led me down to this thing called Animal Flow, which looks like an amalgamation of all these different things that I was already exposed to, which is essentially what Animal Flow is, right? And so often when I explain it, I often say, the best way for me to explain it is if yoga and breakdancing had a baby, they would give birth to Animal Flow, just to give you that visual. So um, Animal Flow is kind of it's a ground-based movement system, and it's basically its own language when you start to kind of get really immersed in the culture and the community. And it takes a lot of different disciplines, or a lot of different influences from a lot of different disciplines, and blends them together into this unique ground-based system. And so when I discovered it, I fell in love with it, and fell in love with the fluid aspect of it, and like moving like water. And it really is such a phenomenal system with a great expansive community. And I I just knew I had to get involved with it. And so earlier in 2015, I believe it was, I got my level 1. And then recently, got my level 3 after working up the ranks, and I've been practicing ever since, and still love it to this day. And try to continue to evolve my skills. But yeah, I love it. So yeah,
Well, and I love that description because that's what I was thinking. Is it reminds me of almost like the flow of water, right?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It's. Would you say it's almost kind of like there's a spiritual connection for you with animal flow?
For me, yes. I mean, everyone has their own kind of interpretation
Mm.
and how they view animal flow, but for me, it definitely is a very spiritual practice because, again, it's another form of expression for me. So, for me, I firmly believe that you can translate your emotions through your body, right? It's that transmutation of energy because that's essentially what emotions are. It's just energy in motion, and sometimes when, for example, like we were saying earlier, when we suppress our emotions, suppress our feelings, they can get stuck in our body. And then when they're stuck in our body, then they start to manifest in physical negative ways. And sometimes those ways are illness and disease. And so this is why movement, and this is why I've kind of gravitated to movement so much as another form of healing, is because movement is healing, right? If you're not moving, you're dying, right? And so
Mm.
um continuing to move and continuing to encourage people to move and express themselves in unique ways, and be in their bodies and learning to move that energy is super powerful. And it's something that I strongly stand behind, and try to encourage to all of my students that take my class, or even just people that I'm having a conversation with, like yourself, just, you know, whether it is animal flow or whether it's yoga or whatever. It's like I just love movement, and I want to continue to spread that awareness of how movement can be so healing and cathartic, because you can literally take the emotions of what you're feeling and convey them and express them in your movement.
Mm. I
Right?
love that, and it almost kind of reminds me of what you're saying about self love. It's like self love of your body, right?
Absolutely.
Like knowing your body, and one of the things I've noticed, like you'll do a lot of small videos, and I think we saw some clips. We can't see that, we didn't hear it, but you do a lot of really small videos where you really pinpoint specifics of movement. So it's the
Hmm.
animal flow, but I've seen you like target like this is really important for your health. Like what
Hmm.
connection do those the like knowing the nuances of
Hmm.
movement have to the healing piece with connecting that movement to healing.
That's a really good question. I think for me, is it, in terms of the mind, the brain, the body, there's still so much that we don't truly understand because there's such a divide between um, Western and Eastern medicine, right? I feel like Eastern medicine is way ahead of its time, and Western medicine is still playing catch up and
Mm-hmm.
still looking for proof and validation and whatnot, and almost to our detriment in a lot of ways, because like, rather than the proof being in the pudding in terms of, like, trying it and experiencing it for yourself, there always has to be some kind of like scientific data to back it up in all of these studies, when really, Eastern medicine has shown on several occasions that a lot of their modalities do work. Not everything is going to work for everyone, but the fact of the matter is that there is a profound spiritual um, form of healing that is harnessed through a lot of these different modalities, and that's the things that I try to explore and try to, take on for myself, right? Because I'm a firm believer in don't knock it until you try it. And so
Mm.
I've been dabbling in like qigong. I've been dabbling in a little bit of yoga and seeing how it influences my body. Like, I don't want to just read up about it and be like, oh yeah, yoga is good for this and that, and assume that yeah, okay, yeah, sure. Like, I won't know until I try it for myself and see how I
Mm.
respond to it, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I know for me, yoga is a little too slow for me, but I'm not. It doesn't mean that yoga. I'm gonna sit here and say that yoga doesn't work. It just yoga is just not for me per se. But maybe that's something that I need to deal with in terms of like my receptivity, in terms of like I'm so go go go. I want something active and stimulating. Where maybe I need something a little bit more
Mm.
calming and relaxing to kind of balance out my energy system. And so that's kind of just how I view it in terms of all of these things that I'm
Mm.
exposed to.
That's cool though, because I think like that it not every type of movement is for everybody, right?
Right.
Like you really like and I never thought about that because I think sometimes like we put pressure on ourselves and okay, I'm not
Mhm.
as active as you clearly. Like I don't do as much movement as you do, but I think that like oftentimes sometimes people who aren't as active, like it's
Mhm.
this fear of not knowing what's right for us, right? Like, I
Right.
don't know, but like being able to identify like that these movements, this exercise, this
Mhm.
form of fitness is what's right for you is really
Right.
important. But also kind of working through that, like, is it I'm fearful of it because it's new and it's
Mhm.
different and it's so outside my box, right? So how do we also like kind of like go step outside our comfort zone? So there's kind of
Yeah.
like a combination of both, it seems like.
Yeah.
Um, so I love that, and Animal Flow looks amazing. I was telling you earlier, I'm like when I go to Canada next time, I'm definitely going to make a
Absolutely.
trip up to one of your studios and check it
Absolutely.
out and try it out for
Mhm.
sure. But so like who inspires you? Like if you were to think of someone, I know you mentioned a lot of books, and I love it.
Mhm.
Like we have all these books, but like are there particular people like that have inspired you over the years, or one particular
Mhm.
person who's kind of like ignited your love of all these different things?
I'd have to say that I'm very fortunate to have a real like I have a small circle, but the circle of people that I keep around me are all inspiring in their own way. Like my girlfriend is probably the most like she's probably the strongest like woman I know. Like like just her attitude, her in regards to life and how she approaches her training, and she's got two kids, and so like she definitely inspires me. My dad inspires me, and in terms of his kindness, like you could ask him to do anything and he won't even question it. He'll just drop whatever he's doing and just go out of his way to be there for you. um my best friend, Matt. He's got or Matt, my best friend. I grew up with him, and his way of life has always been like, I never get stressed out because things just work out for me in the end, and that's been one of my biggest
Mm.
mantras for me in terms of like whenever I'm like stressed out or whatever, like I'm always just like, okay, well, what would Matt think in this situation? And then he'd be like, yeah, things are just gonna work out in the end, and like I just say, yeah, things are gonna work out. I just got to get through this hurdle, and they always do. So I always keep that in the back of my head. So yeah, to answer your question, just the people that I have in my circle right now, they motivate
Mm.
me and they keep me going, and I think that's really powerful for anyone to have, really, like a strong
Mm-hmm.
support system, whether it's one friend or you know 10 friends. It doesn't really matter as long as you have a strong, genuine support system that keeps you going and motivating. I think that's really key.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that, community and collective,
Yeah.
being in a collective is so important.
Absolutely.
We can't do things in isolation. I mean, we can
No.
do some things in isolation, but really that's not how we thrive, I think,
Yeah.
right? Like, and you brought that view is like, different people in your life bring different vantage points that you might not have seen or heard
Right.
otherwise. So
Hmm.
you mentioned, WWDMD, right? What would Matt do? But
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
outside of Matt and Matt's mantras, and
Mhm.
welcome Redemption. I love it. Redemption song 76.
What's up?
Facts for sure. Another one of our Ranchers fam. And I got to say, welcome and thank you so much for all our Ranchers Union family for showing up, for supporting, for being here too. And thank you, sending good vibes to everyone. Thank you, Ad. So what are your mantras? What are the things that you say, like your internal dialogues that like
Mhm.
are your go-to mantras sometimes when things get hard, right? That move you through stuff.
Mm, I have quite a few, but I think the one that comes to mind, I guess, keeping on topic with like, you know, emotions, is that emotions are neither right nor wrong. It's just energy, and it's all a matter of what you do with that energy. Because for me, I've always kind of remembered, or I try to keep in mind that when you have negative. So when you first of all, when you label something, and we've talked about labels earlier, right? When you label something negative or positive, you add to the story, you subscribe to the story. So rather than subscribing to the story, learn to feel the emotion rather than to label it, right? And
Mm.
so when you feel the emotion, so for example, like when a person is angry, let's say you closed your let's say like you could see without them expressing their anger, and you just looked at their body language, you could probably tell right away
Mm.
how if a person is angry, right? They might be like super tense. If a person is sad, they might be slumping with their posture, all like depressed and everything. If a person's happy, like they've got an extra pep in their step and whatnot. And so your body always has a tell in terms of the emotions that you're expressing, whether so that's why like trying to suppress them is it just
Mm.
doesn't work, right? And so you feel those emotions in your body, so it's a matter of like, how do I move this emotion rather than just labeling it, oh, I'm mad. No, like if you're upset or if you're sad, like for example, if you're sad, you're probably going to feel like this lump in your throat, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for me, when I say emotions are neither right nor wrong, they're just energy. How do I move this energy? If I'm sad and I feel okay, I have this lump in my throat, I'm gonna focus my attention on that lump, and I'm just gonna be with that energy, and I'm gonna breathe into that space until it eventually subsides. And when I first heard about that concept of like feeling your emotions, feeling in your body, I thought it was a little bit woo woo, and then I got more inept into spirituality, and I started to practice it for myself, and it actually does genuinely work when you start to kind of pay more attention to the sensations of your body rather than just labeling, oh, I feel mad or I feel sad or I feel angry. Not to say that it's not advantageous to identify your emotions, but I think doing one without the other, there's a huge disconnect. So learning
Mm.
to also feel your emotions so you can kind of move those emotions.
I love that. And
Yeah.
that's really powerful to have that, again, that control
Yeah.
of your emotions so that they're not controlling you, but you have
Right.
that control over them.
Absolutely.
And going back to all that we keep saying about knowing ourselves, right? So we
Yeah.
know ourselves mentally, we know ourselves in our emotions, we know ourselves
Mhm.
physically, but there's so many elements of knowing ourselves,
Right.
which is a beautiful thing. So
Hmm.
we're about to close out, but before we do, we started off talking about you and your younger self and the way
Hmm.
that you started to believe those labels about yourself. So if you were to give some advice to young Andrew, if you were to go
Yeah.
back and be like, hey, Andrew, this is what you need to know.
Hmm.
What would you say to yourself as a younger version of what you've learned in life?
It's funny that you asked that question because I actually wrote a letter to myself from my future self, like hypothetically,
Yeah.
um, but I didn't say much. I mean, it was a long letter, but it didn't reveal much because I feel like if I had given advice or anything, it would change the trajectory
Mm.
of my journey, and I might
Mm-hmm.
not end up where I needed to be. So I think the only thing I would really say is keep going. Everything is going to be okay, and that's it.
Mm. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
And that, I think, like, that idea, right, is that we go through everything, and it goes back to what we started, right, is that
yeah,
we have to have pain.
yeah,
We have to feel the pain.
yeah,
But we're gonna get through it.
yeah,
We're always gonna get through it.
yeah.
And everyone does. And I think, honestly, this show has proven that, is that
Hmm.
everybody moves through that pain in many ways, right? Like, whatever toolbox you have, you're gonna move through it if you want to, if you
Absolutely,
want to. And
absolutely.
so your younger self would know that it's gonna get better.
Yeah,
That's a beautiful thing. And thank you so much for your
mm,
time today. Like, I'm so glad that we were able to reschedule and I was able to have you here. And everything aligned, and it was beautiful.
absolutely.
And I think we had so much, audience, energy and participation. Final thoughts in terms of, where do people go to find out more about all of your different things? How do we follow you? I know also we didn't mention it, but he has an ebook as well.
Mhm.
And I wrote the name. Sorry. Tell us about your ebook. I'm gonna go through my notes, but like that'll take forever. So I'm just gonna ask you. Tell us about your ebook.
So I wrote it. I wrote it a couple of years, well, several years ago. It's called Journey to Wellness, and it basically, again, just another form of expression for me and my healing journey. And I wrote it with the intention of basically, I was in a very negative space, and I was looking for an outlet, and I was of the frame of mind of, if I was out of having an out of body experience, or if another version of me, a more ascended version of me, was coming to visit my negative or my lower vibrational self, what are some of the things or some of the advice that I would give to this person to help them kind of get back on track? Not necessarily, you know, give them the cheat code, but just kind of realign them to make sure that they're on the right path. And so that was the inspiration of the book.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
it's really outlined very
Mm-hmm.
clearly. I think it really is supportive. Like, I like how you
Mm-hmm.
take it step by step, and you give
Mm-hmm.
guidance, and you even allow people to think about their own goals as you're
Mm-hmm.
going along. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely go check out the ebook. It's linked in the description below. And anything else you want people to know, where do they go? How do they follow you? Go see him on
Uh,
TikTok. Follow him on TikTok for sure. His morning thoughts. I know already. Ja likes your morning thoughts. He's commented on a couple ones that I've posted.
Amazing. Amazing.
So definitely tell us about where we go.
Yeah, so both Instagram and TikTok are Tactivision, so Tactivision, and then my website is Flow Tactics, but with an X, so Flow and then Tactix. I don't know if you can see that, but
And
yeah,
it's
right
it's
there.
yeah, it's down there in the
Yeah,
ticker as well.
yeah.
And all the links are in the description in the YouTube.
Hmm.
So please make sure that you are looking at the description. Make sure you also subscribe to this channel if you haven't done it yet. I saw a lot of new
Absolutely.
people in here. Subscribe to Brown Girl Interrupting. Go and subscribe to my blog as well. Subscribe to all of Andrew's things. Follow him. If you're in Canada, go to one of these animal flow sessions and definitely, experience the movement enthusiast of Andrew Tactix James. Thank you so much again, Andrew, for being here today. It was really such an awesome treat. And to my audience, I hope that all of you are finding your path, your way of healing yourselves and helping to heal others by knowing what's your entry point. For Andrew, it's movement and your creativity of healing. For me, it's been my writing, but it's also education. And so hopefully everyone is finding their spaces of healing themselves and healing others. And collectively, we continue to just grow and develop and be better and stronger to move from pain to power and lead with love. So please join me here again next week at 9 o'clock. I am going to be featuring another wonderful guest, and we will hear more about that in a few moments. And I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Thanks, Andrew, again. Thank
Thank
you to
you.
Ja Logic, who is my producer, who is the man with the plan, and always ready with the videos and the production. I have to really appreciate him. He truly has made my journey of pain to power and creating all of this come to life. And I think a lot of this is about finding people who are your tribe, but also who believe in you. And I'm always grateful for that. So, and I would say, Andrew, you also have definitely put some belief in me in this process. So I appreciate it. And so have a great evening, everyone, and be healthy, be well. And I'll see you again next Sunday. Make sure you go subscribe, hit the links, go to the website and put your email in and read my blog. Good night.
You may know me, but do you really know me? Are you willing to take the time to know who I am? So many layers to uncover. Are you ready to go that deep? See, the ones that truly know me understand the very core of me. I'm a good woman with a good heart, most fail to see. I invite you to take a minute to not use your eyes, but use your heart to see. Don't be afraid, it's okay. It's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay to be scared, to be hurt, to be broken. It's part of the deal when you ever sow. It's time to let it go. It's time to face another day. You may never find the answers to the questions inside you, but perhaps it's better to know you'll be okay. Yeah. Truly hurt me more than you'll ever know. I never knew pain so real could pierce this deep, to a point where I couldn't move, completely numb to any other feeling. Yeah. Now I hope this burden on me, my friends don't even recognize me. I stare into the mirror and view an empty shell of who I used to be. And pain is in everything I say or do. I wonder if the love I felt will return to me. Yeah, but for now I'll be okay. It's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay to be scared, to be hurt, to be broken. It's part of the deal when you ever sow. It's time to let it go. It's time to face another day. Hey, you may never find the answers to the questions inside you, but perhaps it's better to know be okay. Yeah, yeah. To know that I'm stronger than they say I am. That even in defeat I can take a stand. To recognize that loss can also lead to gain. That the sun can still shine even in the rain. I may be down now, but I'm far from out. Even in the face of despair or even doubt, I just really needed time to figure it out. See the image of the woman that I am now. Oh, 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 oh. It's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay to be scared, to be hurt, to be broken. It's part of the deal when you ever down. Just let it go. Gotta face another day. You may never find the answers to the questions inside you, but perhaps it's better to know. You'll be okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.